watching, you're watching, you're watching. You're watching, you're watching, you're watching. You're watching, you're watching, you're watching. You're watching.
Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, Devin Townsend.
Hi.
Hi.
This is totally normal. This is what humans are supposed to do. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. I hope your day is well, and I hope you're drinking water, and it's been nice seeing you, and good night.
Thank you so much.
Oh, okay, another? Okay. So, am I supposed to lead this, or does somebody else lead it?
Oh,
No worries, we're leading this
I'm going to start.
Oh, hello.
Welcome to Hellfest.
Why, thank you. It is heavenly.
Yeah, I know that. No, really, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much because during the pandemic situation, you were here for us, and that was really important for me, and of course for all the fans.
Yeah.
Thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart.
That's really, really nice to hear. Thank
Yeah.
you. I think like all of us, we were all just trying to figure out how to navigate it, right? And if there's anything that I feel happened during the whole pandemic was, it's very easy to, while you're doing this for a living, have to suspend the humanity of it, because in order to sort of do this in front of people, you have to pretend on some level that there's a fundamental difference, you know, that a musician and then the fan or audience or whatever, there's like some difference. But I think one of the things I'm most grateful for about the pandemic was just that sense that immediately everybody was like, oh, of course there's no difference.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of human beings all trying to take care of their families and trying to take care of their kids. And then, I don't know about you, but it's like, you know, my parents are going crazy, and it's like friends are going bananas. And the people I felt most sorry for, actually, I've known a few sort of famous, really famous musicians, and that have maybe had a whole lifestyle of people taking care of them for so long, and then during the pandemic, everybody's like, guys, you're gonna have to figure this out for yourself, and they're just like, I don't know how to do anything, you know.
What about you? How did you manage your family time,
I think panic is a great motivator. You know, I was like, I remember from the first moment, so I got sick, and then I came back to Vancouver, and immediately it just seemed like everybody had to sort of reorganize their priorities so quickly. And I saw the neighbors and you know, my son and my wife and my parents, and then people become so divided, and then all that was happening in the US and all these things, right? It became very clear that in order to continue doing what I love, which is I love making music. I love it. But in order to continue doing that, you kind of have to pivot. And so all those things that we did during the pandemic, like the Order of Magnitude or the streaming concerts or the puzzle or anything like that, it was all just a reaction to it. It's funny because when I did that puzzle project, people like, this is really strange music. It makes no sense. And I'm like, well, the function of the music for me is it's got to be a representation of what's going on in your life. And things didn't make sense. It's like, and I kept trying to write something that was nice, because I was thinking, oh, it would be nice to be able to provide, like, if you're a musician and you have the capabilities to be able to write, it's like you want to be able to help to some degree. But I also felt that if you ignored your own chaos, it's disingenuous as well, right? Like if you say, oh, everything's wonderful, here's a bunch of uplifting songs, and inside you're like, what the fuck? So, you know, I made a bunch of what the fuck things, and then once it was done, it was easier for me to then move on. But I think that my world is very similar to anybody else's world. I remember some of the nights in 2020, like the evenings, were so profoundly dark. And I remember because my son was out of school, and you know, all the schools were out, and I was thinking, well, how do you stay strong for your parents? How do you stay strong for your friends? How do you stay so strong for your kids? So I remember I'd take them out for a hamburger, like we're driving and I'm trying to pretend like everything's normal, and in my head I'm like, this is so fucking dark, man. Like, but I think just like anybody else, it's the only thing you can do is sort of put one foot in front of the other. And I think a big part of the pandemic for me was recognizing that I got to be a little easier on myself, because I spent so much time putting all these parameters on what I should do and what I should be able to handle this, and you know, strong people do this and weak people do this, and all these real sort of black and white things. And I realized pretty quick, it's like if you don't acknowledge the fact that this is really difficult, then you're not doing anybody any favors. Then you're just kind of lying to people. And so the idea of getting back out and performing and writing, there's really something that I think there's like a shift that happened, for me at least, where now that I'm out, I do have a different sense of priorities, but I also feel like, oh, I'm really grateful for this, right? It's awesome, right? But it's also super weird. You're so welcome, thank you, my God.
Twins.
Hi, Liz from Twin Music. I'm going to ask you our signature question.
Sure.
If you could have any band perform one of your songs, what song would it be? What band would it be? What song would it be? And would it be in your style or their style?
I get Enya to do Shitstorm. See how well that would go. You remember Enya? I love Enya. And Shitstorm would be great. I just love to hear her just, I can't even fucking piss. I mean, it'd be amazing. With all the reverb and like 40 vocals. That would be amazing. I mean, because it's funny, it's like sometimes the questions come where they're like, if you could put together your perfect band, like your ideal band, or if you could jam with any musicians living or dead, who would it be? And I'm always like, I don't want to jam with anybody. And plus, a lot of times you think about it, if you put together a fictional band of people who are each one of them in their own rights, you know, it's like, oh, we'll get John Bonham on drums and Jimi Hendrix on guitar, and like, but you think all these personalities are so strong that in a lot of ways the reason why their music worked was because there was something to sort of counteract it. You know, the acidity and the sweetness, right? If you have just a bunch of strong personalities in one place, there's a good chance it would just be like mediocre, because everybody would be pretending like they're compromising, just like, oh, okay, well, we'll let you do your stupid thing, and then it all. But and so when it comes to other people doing my music, I have not zero desire to hear it, but if I was to hear it, I'd want it to be absurd, right? So Enya doing Shitstorm would be great. Yeah.
Hello, Devin.
Yes, sir.
We're here with Loud TV.
Oh, yeah.
So your quarantine concerts were very personally entertaining for me.
Thank you.
They were excellent. All the different angles and the effects that you used. And it felt very personal.
Yeah.
And very approachable.
Yeah.
And now that the pandemic is completely over and no one's ever going to get sick again.
That's what I heard.
Right. That's the news.
Yeah.
So now that that's where it is. Can you ever see yourself returning to a format like that, where you're I guess, in that level of contact, but virtually? Well,
a lot of things have happened over the past, because I've been on tour now for 3 months, and this is after 2 years of chaos, and it's been very difficult. But there's a couple things that I'm very grateful for on this run. For example, it was easy for me to, in the past, rationalize some of my behavior because it's for the job. And I realized over the course of the pandemic how much of my personality has gone into like making people happy, but not in a healthy way. I think it's good to want the people that you care for to be happy, but sometimes when you are people pleasing, just because of being insecure or wanting approval or wanting validation from people, it can lead you to not sort of seeing the forest for the trees. And I've recognized after this whole period, and then fortunately being out on tour again, there's lots of things about the job that I love. Like, I love people and I love music, but I don't love the attention in a lot of ways, but I love to create. And I think that it's very easy to sort of get into this habit of like, well, you're going to tour, so then you can get better opportunities to tour, then you can keep touring. And it's like, yeah, but it just keeps, the bigger it gets, the more psychological work it gets. Because in order to be functional for your friends and for your family and for your kids. When you're out in this environment where it is so purely abstract, like I said when I first came in here, like to be a person like any of us that is in front of other people and our opinions are meant to mean something, you have to suspend a certain amount of the reality that the past 2 years has enforced on us. And for me, I realized over this tour, I'm like, oh, I don't like a lot of this. I like playing, I like people, I like music, but I don't like the idea of what it means to be like famous in a sense. But on some level up to this point, I've chosen it because for whatever reason, maybe I wanted to not let down the team, or I didn't want this or that to be affected by my decisions. But I hit 50 on this as well, and I was like, man, there's certain things I can identify I don't like. I don't like loud music now. I know it's crazy. I mean, I play loud music, but I hate being around loud music. It's fucking horrible, man. You know what I mean? It's like I was trying to take a shower and it's just in the background. I'm thinking to myself, oh, this fucking sucks. Like, I don't like this at all, man. You know? And then it's like, at home, for Christmas, I got a toilet seat that's heated and it's got like a bidet and it's amazing. It's amazing. And it's like 6 steps outside of my studio. I love it. And then, but when you're on tour, you can't, I don't know if you know this, but you can't shit in a tour bus. So I'm a 50-year-old man and I'm shitting in a truck stop every morning and I can't find 70 whatevers to go into the thing to get into the toilet. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't like this at all, man. But I also think that there's a certain amount of compromise that needs to come. And it's like, I do think that it's important if you are playing music and people have some sort of emotional investment in it, that you are there for it, because that's part of the deal. Otherwise, don't put it out, don't monetize it. It's very easy to say, oh, I do this for myself, but if you're monetizing it, you're clearly, it's a part of the deal is to be there for people. But I think that what the pandemic made me realize is I can do a lot from home. I can do a lot of things that will allow me to flourish musically if it's not constantly kind of kneecapped by the need to tour relentlessly. So I'm going to tour much less, and I think that will allow me, like I built a green screen studio at home, and I think a more healthy compromise for my life is going to very much include lots of streaming concerts. So, longest answer ever. Sorry. Woo! Yes, sir.
Hi, Devin. My name is Neil. I'm from Total Rock in the UK. Yes. I've always felt, you are famously creative. We never know what to expect next. Your live shows, I mean, just to take one example, in the UK, Bloodstock, you had an elephant on stage.
Yeah.
I have always felt that the only thing stopping your full creativity would be like a Kiss-size budget.
Yeah.
If you had that Kiss-size budget,
I'd be a menace.
what would that stage set look like? What would you dream of?
That's an amazing question. I could rationalize it taking a long time, and because I want to build a greenhouse, like that's something I'm really into, so I'm going to do that. And I could say, oh, I'm thinking of the show. I think it would have a massive choir, much of which would still be on tape because a live choir often sounds like shit. And I'd have the orchestra. I'm doing the next actual project I'm doing is a musical theater project, and I've been working on it for about 6 years, and it's called The Moth. And the idea is to do it projection mapped, so the inside of the venue becomes like an environment, and it's very interactive with the audience. But the specifics of that narrative would be different each time. But I in lieu of a definite like, oh, I would do this, I would say I love absurdity, and not to be provocative, not to be a jackass or anything like this, but it just seems like somebody had mentioned at one point, what if you had 4 nets over top of an audience, right? Just as an example of absurdity. One of them had like buns, one of them had meat, one of them had condiments, one of them had lettuce. and you just let it go, and then first person to bring a full burger to the stage gets like, you know, a shirt or something. Somebody else is like, but it got a little sadistic. They're like, just drop sharks into the audience and just see what happens, right? But I also like, a lot of times I've got a real close group of friends, and I'm very fortunate. Like, a lot of my friends are 30 some odd years of friendship, and so they'll tell you when you're full of shit, but at the same time you can really jam out ideas. And I love the ideas of everybody sitting around drinking coffee, and then you're like, wouldn't it be funny if, and then something, and then it's, and if you had the budget to articulate it in a way that it was like undeniable, because there's something about being able to take something that on the surface seems completely absurd, but then if you present it with that level of production, people will on some level accept it, and sometimes sort of like try and adhere a metaphor to it, you know, like, oh, this is like this is clearly a statement, right? And you're like, no, we were just all, yeah. And so I think that if I had money to do those things, I'm fortunate that I've got a lot of creative bored friends that we could think up something that would be at the very least interesting, and also people would probably be like, okay.
Hi, Devin.
Hey.
So I'm going to go from the future to the past.
Please.
I've got a bit of a two-part question for you. I'm aiming for me on Music in Ireland, by the way.
Nice.
So next year is 30 years since Sex and Religion came out.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, you reconnected with Steve Vai at the Starmus Festival, and you played Here and Now.
Yeah.
I wanted to know how that was, playing that song and going back into that, and would you like to celebrate the 30 years, and how you might feel about playing, you know, In My Dreams With You, some of those other tracks?
I didn't like that song.
So not that one.
Yeah, but I love Steve, and if he wants me to do something with him, of course I do something with him. He's a genius, and I love him. Like, I love that guy. But also, I think a lot of what made that record interesting yet very odd was the fact that we're very different. And back then we were really different, you know. Now we're less different, but we're still very different. And the Starmus Festival was great to reconnect, but we're still very different. And and I may be wrong, but I think our reasons for doing what we do are fundamentally slightly different. And it's always a little chocolate and cheese, you know. But among the people who I count as being closest to my heart, he is one of the very few. And as a friend, I would be happy to do anything that he would ask of me, because I love him. Yeah, it's true. Yes, sir.
Hi. How do you think the COVID situation, the whole global pandemic stuff, has affected your songwriting and your approach of music, and how do you feel it evolved those past like 20 years or something?
Well, I think that the ways that I create music hasn't changed, and so I've said it before, and at the risk of sounding as pretentious as I'm sure it does, music is a function of a process for me. When I was a very young kid, I was hypersensitive, still am, more so now, regrettably. But I also come from a sort of stoic background. Like my family, it was very, you know, my grandparents were from Britain, and my other side were from Ireland, and there's a very sort of stiff upper lip sort of upbringing where overt displays of emotion are not necessarily encouraged. But because I was hypersensitive, I found that music was a loophole for me to try and figure out where I'm at. And the whole goal since the very beginning, and even though in the beginning maybe I didn't realize it, now I clearly do, has been to unfuck myself. And the music acts as a byproduct of that, and that's it. So whatever's going on, it's like it's the exhaust of a process that once it's done, maybe because like my peripherals of my own emotional growth are so limited that I don't know what's going on. But I have such a vision that it basically happens like this. I always have a guitar around or something, and then I'm like, okay, what is appealing to me now is, for example, maybe the color green. and this particular font, and this particular guitar sound, and this particular thematic angle, and maybe we should go for this type of art, and maybe we should go for this type of like a drummer, and then, oh, it would be cool now that we've got that, and it's reductive. So you start doing things just to see what floats your boat, and it's very clear. It's like I keep going down rabbit holes musically that are wrong, but then when you get it that it's right, it's like the implication of that is like that scratches an itch that fundamentally I feel I need to represent. By the time it's done, it's usually not until the last week that I'm able to say, oh, it's about anger, it's about the death of my cat, it's about whatever it is. And then by doing it, the records, that you just like, okay, so then they just go away. You know, and you forget about them to some extent. And so people sometimes say, okay, well, the reason perhaps that you do things that are so varied is that you're trying to be provocative, for example. But it's absolutely not that. It's like once you're finished something, fuck it, you know, it's like, not fuck it, but it's like once you're finished, you've spent so much time focused on that it seems absurd to stay there. So you're like, okay, that's done. Get it out of the way. And then the next thing that happens is the same process. You just start writing. Maybe a certain guitar all of a sudden seems appealing. Maybe a certain sound, guitar sound, aesthetic, whatever, movie. And then you start going down this avenue. And then if you get it right, reductively, over the course of usually a year, at the end of it, you're left with something that's like, oh, that's Terria, that's the Hummer, that's Synkestra, that's Empath, that's Alien, that's Ziltoid, whatever. And Puzzle's the same, Snuggle was the same, Lightwork was kind of the same, except I had help with that one, so I'm confused about it, but I'm sure it'll be fine in a year and a half. But the whole pandemic didn't change the process, it just changed the input. You know, the input was very specific. So while I tried to articulate myself in some ways that I thought would be right, potentially, like let's write a bunch of feel-good songs, what kept coming up is like, no, I want to write chaos, and I want it to be ugly. And I remember telling the mastering engineer, it's got to be muddy, it's got to be like gross, it's got to have sirens in it, you know. And at the end, Puzzle, and it became a metaphor for that process, right? So it hasn't changed much, to be honest.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. That was the last question. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Devin Townsend.
Thanks. Oh, that's it? Yay!
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.